You're listening to Consulting Logistics, presented by FreightPlus. I'm your host, Kyle McNaught. Thanks for checking us out. Today's another fun one. We're doing SCU30, Supply Chain Under 30. It's our series where we talk to up-and-coming supply chain professionals kind of about their journey. We try to interview everyone that's under the age of 30 just to talk about what the younger generations did to get into the industry. It's a super fascinating conversation, and I'm really excited to talk to this next person because he's so fresh in the industry, but he's awesome. He's getting so much experience, and I talk with him every single day because for today's SCU30, we're going to have Jackson Alms, account manager here at FreightPlus, talk a little bit about his experience. Let's kick it off. Jackson, how's it going?
Good. Thanks for having me, Kyle. Uh,
Absolutely. How's everything? How's Boston treating you? How's the cold? All this fun stuff we're dealing with right now?
yeah, Boston's fun. Not clearing off my car outside the window is going to be fun to deal with later in the day. So,
Oh man, and you're from Colorado, right? Like you
yep,
you know the cold, so you know that you're just delaying the inevitable. You got to pull that band-aid off. It's just gonna be
yeah,
worse and worse.
yep. From Colorado, so I've dealt with taking snow off my car before. But yeah, working from home has its advantages at least because I haven't left home in many days since the snowstorm. So I'm just trapped here.
Oh, say my wife's car has like literally it's got like foot of snow on
Yeah.
it. I'm like, great, I gotta clean this off eventually. But let's go back. Don't need to talk about my wife. Let's talk about you. Let's kind of jump into it. I mean, you're from Colorado. Talk to me a little about your childhood growing up. Are you an only child? What was kind of your experience growing up?
Yeah, so I was had a younger sister, raised in Colorado. I was actually born in California, but raised in Colorado from the time I can remember on. So pretty much born and raised in Colorado. From there, went lived in the Denver area. Went to a public high school, so kind of just lived normal life, Colorado life, skiing, outdoors, camping, kind of my activities as growing up as a kid. But yeah, decided after growing up to leave Denver promptly. Um, didn't want to stay around my family, so from going from Colorado, I actually went directly to San Diego for college, and really only checked out colleges in the California area just to try to feel the sun 24/7, I guess,
I love it.
and ended
Yeah.
up here.
That's the thing. Living up here, I realized. So, like, because I grew up in Florida, it was like, oh, no brainer. You go to in-state. It's like how you afford it. But like up here, like everyone who's like goes to school up here, they're like, I don't know why I picked up here. I should have gone down south. I should have gone to California. I should have gone somewhere there's warm. Why would I pick this as the place to live? Uh, but before we even get into San Diego, let's go back a little bit. Like, what kind of student were you? Were you kind of more interested in the STEM stuff? Were you kind of a history guy? Like, what was like what interested you as a kid?
Yeah, I mean, growing up, I guess I was never much of like the literature person, never into the English writing type of type of classes. I did better in math, and thought about math as a minor, even potentially later on. But math, never really loved math as a subject. The one thing I did pursue throughout high school that was part of my personality and kind of helped me be where I am was a debate. I was part of a debate club for all 4 years, and uh, public forum debate, which is a partner debate. So had a partner all 4 years throughout high school.
That's awesome. I kind of that's it's interesting, especially kind of knowing where you are now and kind of what you do. It's fascinating of like the debate background. What
Mhm.
about did you play sports growing up? How about like that type of stuff? Is it mainly just kind of I mean you're in Colorado, right? So it's kind of like outdoor skiing,
Yeah.
all that type of stuff.
Yeah, I played baseball for a lot, like when I was younger, not once I reached high school or anything past that. Still love like just throwing the ball around, but yeah, like you said, Colorado, every winter you're skiing, or yeah, I was skiing, like sometimes like 30, 40 days a year. So, then camping, my family always kind of put an emphasis on camping and doing that with friends and family. I mean, even just hiking. being from Colorado, like concerts and having Red Rocks in my backyard is pretty sweet. And I have spent probably too much money on concert tickets there, but definitely love love that, and it was a huge part of my upbringing.
It's interesting. I mean, I feel like we have a lot in common. It was sort of the same thing. I mean, Florida, you were outside, believe it or not. Like it wasn't in like any inside as much. You kind of were outside. You were in nature and stuff like that. Like same in like the education stuff. It was more kind of like, yeah, I like some stuff, but I never really kind of had a footing of where I wanted to be.
Hmm.
Uh, before we transition into kind of what drove you, kind of what interest you found in kind of college and all that type of stuff, what was technology like? Because that's something I always find interesting. Like what type of technology did you have growing up? Was it immediate, like you had a computer in your house, you had your own personal computer? When did you get your phone? Talk to me about that stuff.
Yeah. I let's see. I kind of had technology most of my life. I definitely had, like, we had the family computer set up in like the living room or like computer room, whatever it was. So I always had like the big desktop for the family, and I think I got, and then phones had like, I don't know. I was around the era where like it didn't have a smartphone yet, but I had like just like the baby phones that you could just call numbers on and not text or
Yeah, what was your
anything.
high score on Snake?
Yeah, exactly.
uh,
But yeah, I think I got like first like iPhone maybe like end of like middle school. For me, that's like I don't know, 20
yeah, that was like
2012.
2006, 2007, something like that. Yeah,
Yeah, and
I
then
think. I don't
for
remember.
me it was like, I'm trying to think. I graduated high school in 2016, so middle school in 2012. So like around 2012 got an iPhone. Around 2012 got like my first laptop. Like going into high school type of stuff.
Did
And
you
then from the
In high school, did you guys use laptops and stuff like that? Was that kind of like you bring your own personal laptop and like, because for me, the experience was college, right? College, everyone
Yeah.
brought their own laptops, but was that like a high school experience for you?
In some classes you were using laptops. I'd say like most of the general classes I wasn't using laptops, but for like my speech and debate was actually a class I took, as well as being part of the team. So like for that you were just busting away on searching stuff. So I think that class might have been an outlier, but used it some in like writing reports and like writing essays and stuff.
Yeah, no, that's fascinating. I mean, again, like it's funny hearing just the middle school was your first iPhone because I think the iPhone came out in my college career. So it's one of those like you try to trying to connect, and it's especially in this whole connected world, you gotta like it's stuff that's so fascinating of just like, hey, this technology for you and me is completely different on how it worked in our lifestyles, and I think that's something that's super interesting, especially as we talked to like you and SCU30. It's something that you kind of have known your whole life. So one of the big reasons we talk about this is that let's talk a little bit kind of college, right? It seems like the main driver for you is what the hell's warm, which is
Yeah,
fascinating.
kind of.
But what major did you pick? Kind of what was your thinking there?
So I went into college, or like thinking about college, knowing I wanted to go somewhere warm, or at least like the West Coast. Had family out in California, but just even Oregon, us, like Washington, something like that. I also applied to. And then I kind of focused in on, I ended up choosing international business as my major that I went in college with and ended up graduating with. And through that, kind of had some interest. Like I knew from international business, I wanted to study abroad at a point, which was kind of my main focus for doing that, as well as just learning like other cultures. And I knew like growing up and like just being in high school, you always talk about globalization and stuff. So I was like, I figured business isn't as much just business anymore. It's all going to be international business at a point. So that's why I chose it, and ended up at USD. First, because if anyone's ever been there and you drive through the campus, it looks like a resort. There's palm trees. It's white buildings with blue rooftops. It's beautiful. So that's
It's
a
San
sell.
Diego. Yeah.
Yeah. And then also in the international business department, if you do major in that, you're required to study abroad for at least a semester. So I was like, that's a good selling point to my mom to let her make me go abroad somewhere. So that's why I ended up choosing it in San Diego.
That's awesome. So, I mean, aside from being in San Diego, which by
Yeah,
far is
yeah,
top city for me, like San Diego, New Orleans, then Florida is like where I'd want to live.
yep.
But yeah, talking to me, like, did you get the class wise? Did you get any? I mean, business. Like, did they talk about supply chain? Yeah, kind of full disclosure. I know what you minored in. So, talk
Yeah.
to me a little bit about kind of how much exposure you started getting to the supply chain and like logistics in college.
So I would say it actually started. I didn't going into college. I had zero exposure. Maybe like you hear about it, but you don't fully understand what it entails. Then going into college, you start taking like I think it was just like a business development or maybe even like a marketing class where you're looking at the structure of the organization and like the supply chain came up. That's maybe the first time I ever heard about it and looked into it, but still wasn't as interested. And then maybe transitioning ahead of time, but when I studied abroad, I went to Fallendar, Germany, which is a small town, pretty much just the size of the college, with a few extra 100 people in there.
How many palm
Um,
trees?
Not a lot of palm trees.
What? Germany doesn't have a lot of palm trees?
Yeah, and so I went to a pretty small town to Wau, or how you say it in English, WHU. Um, and so it's a business school, just a business school in Ballendar, Germany, a small city, kind of just focused on just business. And there, I kind of like Germany as a whole. I kind of learned out every class, whether it was negotiations to logistics, which is the first time I ever took a logistics class, to just a general business class. They had a huge emphasis on supply chain and optimization in supply chain and kind of everything from what we're doing, like the transportation side and how they set up their trucking companies to how car manufacturers, because Germany loves their cars, make a Mercedes or any BMW down to the T perfect. Um, so that was the first time I ever had a supply chain class, and from there I went into college, like I said, international business. I was thinking about a math minor, so I had taken a couple math classes, but I had taken 4 supply chain classes, which counted for supply chain classes when I went back to university, and I fully dove into supply chain as a whole after being in Germany.
So what did you find interesting about it? Kind of what piqued your interest? And like, did they also like did they tell you how jobs work in the supply chain, or was it mainly like just kind of cool seeing it? So they just more or less.
No.
So what interested you in it then?
Um, I just felt like it was kind of just the most all encompassing like part of a company almost like there are finance divisions and there are accounting divisions and marketing and sales, but I feel like any company in the world, whether it's a service job to the biggest supply chain company like Amazon, everyone needs a supply chain, and that's what my professor told me. And I at first necessarily didn't think how important it was, and so I like was talking to this really cool German professor that lives in like Strasbourg and great guy. So he just comes up to me. He's like, "What did you do? What jobs have you had?" And at this point, I was like a pizza delivery guy, like the summer before.
Supply chain pizza delivery guy.
Yeah, and he just is like, "Okay, well, let's think about it. Obviously, there's the normal supply chain you think about with a pizza delivery. Like you have to bring the ingredients in, and like these ingredients come from different places. Like there's fruit, and then there's dough, and then there's meat. but what about like the supply chain internally while you're making the pizza, about like how it runs through a process of the movement of the pizza being made is only just part of the, like there's so many different supply chains in the all-encompassing supply chain. It's like bringing the ingredients in, making the pizza. There's a whole supply chain to me going out and delivering the pizza. So yeah, that's kind of when I was just like, oh wow, like even if you're a service job that doesn't sell any products, there's still a process and supply chain to be optimized and to look at. And I guarantee, and like there was then some facts, like so many companies don't even have a supply chain division, and it's just like, well, that seems like a great place to optimize business.
Yeah, no, it is fascinating, especially when you kind of jump into it. But like you say, it's that you're not even thinking about it. You need someone like the German professor who like can
Yeah.
break it down for you. Let's talk, and we'll get into kind of what your role is today and kind of what you're doing in the supply chain. But talk to me a little bit about like the technology they discussed, and especially in these courses. Did they, knowing what you know now, like did they talk about the technology that's utilized in the supply chain, or was it more theoretical of what they were speaking to?
So for that, I think that falls more on, once I got back to USD, I then decided to minor in supply chain and really just dive into it and take more classes there. I think they did a little better of a job actually presenting me with technology and applications. I don't think there was any technology specific, like actual platforms that I have used on a day to day basis that I have, other than Excel or something like that, that I learned from uh, my courses. But I do think there is like some just like keywords and key things to look out for that maybe I wouldn't have thought about if it wasn't for taking the courses.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Like we talk a lot about how so like companies are working in Excel, it's bad, you could be doing more, but like it still is a foundation, right? Like learning
Yeah.
how to work Excel is extremely important, and it's like almost something that like gets second thought like a lot of times. It's kind of like assumed that like it's a bunch of fields, it's a table. How can't you like figure this out? But like it is interesting of like how important it really is from a very fundamental level at college to even like get into it, understand that type of stuff. What about differences? Differences with like what German supply chains are. I mean, you're working in more domestic supply chain. What was something that like you found interesting in just the differences of how Germany kind of takes their approach to the supply chain?
Yeah, I think that's also kind of in turn kind of came back to my international business kind of part of it too, because after being in Germany, I then took like just a class on international business that kind of looked at different cultures and how they um, how they interact in the business world. And my professor gave me a great book. Actually, I wish I had it on me and I could remember the name. But it was an outline of some of the major countries around the world, and it described the countries based on something like significant in their culture, and kind of linked how one the like the that part of the culture can uh, emulate or like be an example of the whole culture. So for like the US, for example, they said like the game of football, just because how there's like a quarterback who is like a one strong leader, like the head of the CEO, and there's flashy players, and the tailgate is a whole part of any scene, and just kind of making connections to like how business people are in America versus the comparisons in tailgate. And I remember getting this book after being in Germany, and they used the German orchestra as the example for Germany. And I just thought it was the perfect example of how Germany like does things, because like the German orchestra is so fine tuned, and it's when you're in the crowd, it's silent. No one says a thing. Everyone's just observing because it's all perfect already, and everything goes as planned. And at the end, it's huge and extravagant because it's just perfect. And the orchestrator doesn't need to say a word but knows how to lead his whole. It was just very emblematic of like how we're a much more loud and like you're really into the business is something you have to talk about and really like talk to someone on a day to day and be like get to know them over lunch. Where Germany, it's like it can be very much more precise and data driven, and nothing needs to be said, and you know everything.
Interesting. Yeah, you should look up. We should find the book. If you can find it later, I'll put it in the show notes of what the book was, because
Yeah,
that sounds fascinating.
I'll try to find it. I bet I will be able to.
um, so before we kind of wrap up the college experience, take it kind of looking back at it now, knowing like the audience, right? It's we're trying to shed light for the younger generation. If you could do it all over again, kind of what would your approach been to college? Kind of seeing that you found an interest when you studied abroad, and like, hey man, I wish I kind of would have done this stuff. Is there, if you could do it all over again, would have you approached it any different? Was there some classes you kind of wish you took now that you kind of have been in the marketplace?
Yeah, I mean, that's a hard question for me. I don't know if I've had enough time to think about
True,
that.
completely
But
fine. Yeah.
huh, I don't know if I were to do it again. I think it's hard for me looking back on it because I graduated the year my school got the supply chain major, and so I just because I'm being a senior and declaring I couldn't have the supply chain major. So if I were to go back, I would do that. And just hope the school has a supply chain major when I join. But beyond that, um, for me actually one thing I took language way too late. Bless you. Um, if I were to take a language, I feel like I would better understand it now rather than like cramming it in my second semester senior year when I really didn't care.
Yeah, I took freaking Latin. I have no idea why. I took it. I'm like, I can't understand language. Like, I can sort of understand a little bit of French, a little bit of Spanish, a little bit of like the Romance languages, but like at the end of the day, it's not helpful. Like I
Yeah.
don't know it enough, but yeah, language is another one that my brain just doesn't work for language. I don't understand it. Like I know what they're saying, like I understand the whole idea that the sentence structure is completely different, but it blows my mind, and I'm just so bummed that I never took it either. But yeah, I'm with you. It's kind of like now that you're a little bit older, you're like, oh yeah, I could see why that would have been helpful. Stupid me.
Well, for me too, it's also I took German because I went to Germany, and I took it after I went to Germany, so it was not as helpful for me going to Germany. It was probably should have done it the reverse order.
Yeah, but you can go to Jacob's Worth in Boston and get a good schnitzel now. So that's
Yeah,
all that
oh
matters,
yeah,
right? Yeah, there
oh
you
yeah.
go. So let's talk like graduation comes up. What was your plans? Did you kind of know where you were going? Kind of what happened there? And this is going to be fascinating because your graduation
Didn't happen.
legit didn't happen, right? COVID. Thanks a lot. Talk to me a little bit about that. What was your plans kind of leading up to it? Kind of what were you thinking?
Yeah, so my graduation is still pending. Hopefully we can come back. They said they might have a graduation this year. We'll see if I go back, if it's even
Would you?
allowed.
I gotta, because like, so I had graduation, thought it was the dumbest thing. I'm like, what am I sitting here for? We had a weatherman talk. Like, that was the big thing. Or like, Florida State, you expect like a decent speaker. We had a
Yeah,
weatherman
yeah.
speak to us. We're like, that's dumb. Uh, like, cool. Yeah, we live where there's hurricanes. But would you go, like, would you actually want to do it? Walk
Uh,
across and all that?
I don't mind the walking across thing, but for me, I think it was more because the timing COVID hit. It was for us like right after our spring break, which was nice. At least we had a spring break. But it was kind of like that was our last hurrah for like all of our friends, and some friends like went home for spring break and then stayed home. So there's people that like I was like friends with, going to see every day, and haven't seen in close to a year now. And so it would be cool for me not to walk across the stage, but to do that like graduation feeling of just seeing all your friends together. Like,
Getting actual closure. Yeah.
yeah,
Like
yeah,
actually getting to say goodbye. Like the usual,
yeah,
hey, we're off to go do this thing. Not just like, see you next week. JK.
yeah, exactly. Like, definitely some people that said like I'll see you next week, and then never. I have not seen since.
Oh man, that's so that you don't even think about that. But Yeah, that's a bummer, man. I'm sorry to hear that. Like, hey,
Hey,
trust me,
hey,
it's one of the like
COVID.
you wrap up and at the end of college, you're just ready to get the real world. You're sick of homework. You're like, school's dumb. I'm ready to get this out
Yeah,
of here. And then you're just like, oh wait, I'm out of it. Like, what
yeah.
happened? Like, everyone was living my lifestyle. Now I'm in this world that like people live what they're gonna live, and I can't like I don't get to hang out with them.
That's why I'm hoping it'll happen. That's why
Yeah,
I'm keeping my
fingers
hopes up.
crossed for you, bud. Fingers
Yeah,
crossed.
maybe not this year.
Probably, probably
Yeah,
not this
probably
year.
not this
Yeah.
year.
Did you have a job lined up? Like, what was that? But you wouldn't even think about that, right? Because you weren't even thinking. Like most people, I didn't think about a damn job until like I got out of college. Like, were you thinking about that stuff?
Well, so for me, it was a little different, I guess, because I did have an internship throughout most of my senior year of college, which continued on into some of the summer. And so that I was working at a company called Meridian Rapid Defense Group. They sell barriers, anti-terrorism defense barriers for like car ramming attacks. So very specific field, and I was kind of just looking at like kind of in their supply chain, kind of in just the whole business, just learning. It was very small, and so kind of just in all part of that. So when COVID came around, I was still working for them, and their business kind of completely changed as well. Because as you can imagine, they're for crowd protection. So when COVID came around, there's not a lot of crowds to protect in outdoor places. So they had to kind of change their business structure as well. So for me, it kind of slowed down helping them, but still working as they needed me. So I wasn't necessarily thinking I was going to continue with that after college, but I was definitely still helping them as needed, and trying to be a part of the team. So I wasn't necessarily looking for that, but at a point they did, like, it kind of just was natural for me to leave as they were as I was starting to look for jobs, and they were just to something more permanent, and they were just figuring out how to sell barriers at a time when no crowds can get together. But yeah, so it was from there I started applying to jobs, and I knew it was going to be a rough time applying to jobs just based on everything. So I just kind of, like, I didn't have a specific location in place, which I
Right.
think maybe helped me out a little more. I yeah,
You just
sorry.
applied. Like, what job? Like, were you applying for like a certain type of job, or you just like blanket? Hey, I need a job. Like, let's go.
No, I was definitely searching more for supply chain, maybe not as much in the transportation field. I actually wanted to be in transportation, funny enough. So I kind of lucked out for the timing of my job. But I had almost a blank map. I mean, maybe not almost. There was a ton of locations on my map that I was willing to go to. I'm from Denver, so I'd go almost anywhere in Colorado. Uh, Went to San Diego, so San Diego is up there, as well as almost anywhere in California. My sister, a younger sister, ended up going to University of Oregon, so I was okay with anywhere in the Pacific Northwest, so like Seattle, Oregon, like Portland. And then my girlfriend is from here and was moving back here, so I was Boston was on that list, as well as kind of just the Northeast in general. And then have family in Chicago, so just drop one right in the middle as well, just
You
because.
got all the big spots. So that's I mean that's good. I mean you knew you want to be supply chain. You kind of knew that you could open it up and kind of I mean that's a big thing, right? It's like you got to just be able to go. Where's the work, right? Even though
Yeah.
we've seen a more remote kind of access to stuff, it's still one of the things of just like hey, you got to kind of get to a place, especially kind of starting out. Talk to me kind of about how you end up joining Freight Plus. Like how did you get here and all that type of stuff.
Yeah. So I think I randomly just came across what was then Aborn, like just a job listing, I think on LinkedIn, if probably, and just applied to it, kind of just normal. I remember checking out the country or the company, uh, and just I knew it looked smaller at the time. There wasn't much information like I could glean because it was a smaller company. It wasn't like a huge like Amazon company where you could look in the huge different departments. It was just one location, just a set number of crew. So applied to it, and I remember getting an interview, and then was hired.
Yeah, and so for the audience, the position you work at Freight Plus is an account manager. So
Yes.
essentially, talk to me a little bit, kind of very high level, kind of what your kind of role is and how you help, especially in managed transportation, right? That's one of the biggest buzzwords in the industry this year, especially because of last year. So kind of what are you doing? Kind of how does account management work within supply chain?
Yeah, so high level for me is on a day-to-day basis. I'm kind of handling any and all questions the clients may have. Kind of specifically focusing on like a data-driven approach to how to solve these questions, whether it be you know reducing cost per pallet, or just reducing variables, like reducing the cost versus other variables, seeing how transit time is affected in different by different carriers at different times of the day, and just different analysis there. How to mitigate claims at a high level, not just focusing individually on all of them. So kind of just answering any and all questions, and trying to back all these answers with not just hey because I haven't had the industry knowledge. Like I can't just say hey, I know this from experience. I got to use the data I have in the system to back me up and help boost my confidence to answer these questions.
So how does that work for you? I know like you hear a lot of times that like, hey, must apply with X number of years of experience, and like you can see where that's valuable, right? Like especially from an account management role. But it seems to me one of the cool things I kind of get to hear about, and especially the culture of Freight Plus, is the collaboration and the teamwork, and having kind of experts on staff that like we have the best and brightest, right? So if you don't know something about what's happening at LTL, you can always pick up the phone and talk to Chris Gula, or like same with what's going on in Ocean, you talk to Peckham. Like how does that work to kind of back up your, and like you mentioned it, data driven kind of decision making? How does that all kind of work, and how are you prepared for that?
Yeah, so I mean, I don't think any education necessarily can, it's like supply chain as a whole right now, at least how I saw it in college, will never be specific enough to prepare someone fully for just logistics or just warehouse management or just any single part of supply chain. So I don't think I think you kind of are relying on a lot of real world experience. I do think my professors did a good job of trying to give me as real world experiences as they could. But for me, then coming here, I think it was then once you do have a specific thing you can focus on, like for me, then like right as I was hired, like the clients, like you can dig into all the specific clients and what they do. Uh, and so then, and then it's kind of just knowing your real world. It's kind of like an addition of like knowing what like clients you're working for and how they operate and what that entails, like this real world like thought, like hey, I didn't check the weather every day. I mean, I lived in San Diego, but I didn't check the weather every day until like kind of the winter came around with Freight Plus, just because it was like it's actually a part of our industry. And then also, like I said, like the data, like we have so much information in our TMS that you can see trends. You can pull yearly data, 2 year data, just to see how things change and cost change and stuff like that.
What about technology? How surprised were you of, was there a massive use of technology that like you weren't prepared for with school, or was there kind of like a, hey, we're like there's so much potential out there technology wise that we could be utilizing right now that like the industry as a whole just isn't even aware of?
I mean, I think there's probably some technology that's out there that exists that can streamline things that we don't even I haven't even thought about. Even things that I could have used in like random simulations in classes and stuff. But yeah, I don't know. I think the technology for me wasn't, I also think just kind of because of my generation, wasn't hard to get acquainted with at all, because it just took me maybe a couple hours playing around, and I feel like I got it.
Yeah, I find that like it's an interesting thing of like, oh, I wasn't prepared for it. But a lot of like, especially the younger generations coming in are just like, oh no, it's the user interface or the user experience of this isn't that hard. Like it's
Yeah.
read on what's on screen. You kind of more or less can solve the issue half the time. Kind of starting to wrap up. Talk to me. What do you like? I mean, you found interesting kind of seeing how everything was connected in college. Now that you're in the real world, your sleeves are rolled up, you got a big boy jobby job. What do you enjoy about working in the supply chain?
I just like how, I mean, it's never dull at all. At all. There's always something like, and I think this is just kind of that part of that like training part where I'm still 7 months in almost, or yeah, 7 months in. I think today actually, um, like there's still stuff I'm learning and doing for the first time, and there's nothing that'll ever like prepare you for certain problems, but it's also like there's no day that gets old or repetitive. You're never doing like the same thing more than like twice, and if you are, you should probably be talking to someone to fix it. So it's it's pretty crazy. Like there's nothing I'm doing like where I can just be like copy paste kind of. So
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, you got to have the energy for it. You got to, I mean, it's exciting, right? Every day doesn't get boring. You're not just like got an office job doing the exact same thing. I
yeah.
mean, that's going to be fascinating to kind of work with. And then, I mean, we're working, I heard the other day on a podcast I was listening to where they're like, it used to be every company's a media company, every company's a marketplace company. They're like, what 2020 showed everyone is every company's a supply chain company. So like everyone needs to have a
Yeah.
good understanding of their supply chain, how it's working, meet demand. I mean, the demand is
Hmm.
getting there, and like you've gotten to experience it. Like a lot of what we talk about with what we're doing, even with managed transportation, is it's you, right? The managed transportation is you as an account manager handling the transportation woes and being proactive. I guess last thing for anyone that's listening, especially kind of that's younger audience, kind of coming up there, they're in college or they're seniors about to graduate, maybe. What a piece of advice would you give them?
I mean, if you're graduating now, I would just say apply, like just apply. Like I guarantee you, I applied to over like 150 places and heard back from maybe like 10. So just keep applying. And not even heard back in yes, like heard back no as well. So just keep applying. And then just generally, like if you're interested in supply chain, like there are people that like you should just try to talk to as many people that have actually worked in the industry and hear their problems and hear some of their crazy stories, because I don't think reading a supply chain textbooks it necessarily gives you that full story, and I've just read some of them. So
Yeah, no, I love it. I fully believe in the whole internship process too. Like it's
yeah,
so valuable. Get experience, get out there,
yeah.
get to see how this is. Because there's theory, and then there's real world. And like in real world, you're like, oh yeah, I am a human being. I need stuff like sleep and food. So all these
Yeah.
amazing ideas that these companies are doing, you're like, oh yeah, but in the real world, it's almost impossible to like pull off half these like crazy complicated things. Not that we don't do it. At FreightPlus, but it is something that like it's interesting. You get the experience, get that experience. Jackson, man, thanks so much for joining me today. Tell the audience where they can connect with you. LinkedIn's probably the best place.
Yeah, LinkedIn. I think it's just Jackson Alms. It's either Jackson Alms or Jack Alms.
You're looking it up. I'll
I
include the
have
link
it.
in the show notes to make it
Yeah,
easy for everyone.
it's Jackson.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So I'll include the link in the show notes. That way people can connect with you and just get to talk to you. I mean, especially questions. I mean, a lot of like, we get that on our social channels all the time from kids in college being like, hey, how did you run this simulation for like costing freight or like pricing out freight and stuff like that? I'm sure you have some tips of like tricks of how
Yeah,
you were able to do it in college.
lots
So
lots of Excel playing around with in college.
absolutely. Jackson, man, thanks for your time today.
Yeah, thank you, Kyle.
Absolutely. See ya.
See you.
And that's our show. Are you under the age of 30 and working in the supply chain? I want you on my show. just leave a comment and I'll definitely get back to you. In the meantime, like and subscribe to our channel. Thanks for watching Consulting Logistics. I'm Kyle McNaught. Rock and roll!